It's a strange thing, but the moment that moving truck stopped, I knew my peaceful life was over, and it wasn't because of the boxes. It was the silver Mercedes, the one that screeched to a halt. Completely blocking my new driveway, and out stepped a woman who looked like she dressed exclusively at the Hamptons Outlet Mall. Pearls, a freshly pressed linen suit, and a clipboard clutched to her chest like a shield. Or maybe a weapon. And that, friends, was my introduction to Deborah Sterling, the self-appointed queen of Sycamore Creek Estates, and the worst neighbor I'd ever had the displeasure of meeting. She didn't wait for me to say hello. She just snapped, "You need to stop unloading right now. This is a private community, and you haven't submitted your architectural review application." I'd been hauling furniture for 12 hours straight, covered in sweat and dust, and I just stood there, wiping my hands on my jeans, trying to keep my voice even, for the sake of starting things off right. "Ma'am," I told her, "I appreciate the welcome, but this property isn't in Sycamore Creek Estates. My land is independent." Her perfect Botoxed eyebrows tightened into a single terrifying line. "Nonsense. Everything on this side of Willow Creek Road is under the HOA's jurisdiction. You'll need to vacate immediately or face serious penalties." That was the core of the problem, wasn't it? She was wrong, dead wrong, but she had absolutely no doubt in her voice. I had spent 6 months, 6 grueling months, confirming every single detail with the county, the land records office, the title company. My property was a small, perfectly legal, unrestricted parcel nestled right up against her pristine, gated community, but technically, legally, outside of it. The very second my foundation was poured, the harassment began, subtle at first, just an HOA patrol car. One of those ridiculous golf carts they drive, slow rolling past every half hour. Then came the violation notices tacked to my half-built porch, alleging unapproved construction, violation of their pastel paint color palette, a fine for improper placement of my porta-potty. I mean, they were reaching for anything, right? But none of it mattered, because their rules, their precious covenants, conditions, and restrictions, they stopped precisely 38 feet from my western boundary line. I kept every single slip, every time-stamped photo, every angry-looking piece of paper. I knew deep down this wasn't just a simple misunderstanding. This was a power play. Deborah, or Debbie, as I quickly learned to call her in my head, returned that same evening, bringing with her a man she introduced simply as our compliance officer. He didn't even offer a handshake. Just started photographing my front lawn with a high-end camera, muttering about Section 7, Subsection B, prohibiting visible construction materials after sunset. I just smiled, genuinely, maybe for the first time all day, and repeated, "Sir, your CCRs do not apply here. My deed is outside of your jurisdiction." Debbie just scoffed, a truly magnificent sound of pure disdain. "We'll see about that, Mr. Carter," and she stomped off, her heels crunching the gravel, stopping dramatically at what she thought was the property line to snap one final menacing photo of my temporary mailbox. It was all so dramatic, so performative, like she was gathering evidence for a trial that hadn't even been scheduled. That night, I didn't unpack. I went to work. I printed the county's official certified zoning map, the one with the big red line separating Sycamore Creek from the rest of the world, and I taped it to my fridge like a perverse trophy. The next morning, of course, a bright orange final notice was taped to my truck windshield. Failure to comply will result in immediate legal action by the Sycamore Creek Estates HOA. That was the point. I grabbed my phone, turned on the camera, and filmed a slow, steady pan across my fence, because I knew that whatever came next, I was going to need irrefutable proof. Over the next week, Debbie's campaign escalated from annoying to malicious. I was receiving threatening calls from blocked numbers about community enforcement, and one crisp Tuesday morning, I caught a landscaping crew actively tearing down the bright orange survey flags I had placed to mark my boundaries. When I confronted the foreman, a tired-looking guy named Manny, he just shrugged. "HOA told us this area is encroaching on common land, man. I just follow the paycheck." That was the moment, the absolute turning point, when I realized this wasn't about ignorance or a misunderstanding of a map. It was a deliberate, calculated strategy of encroachment and intimidation. So I stopped reacting and I started strategizing. I went out and bought 3 high-resolution, motion-activated trail cameras, the kind hunters use, and I mounted them strategically along my property perimeter, all time-stamped and GPS-enabled. One camera, perfectly placed, captured Debbie herself, dressed in a truly horrifying floral windbreaker, scaling my fence to stick yet another violation notice on my garage door. Another caught her meticulously measuring my porch railing with a tape measure, muttering something about the aesthetic harmony of the neighborhood. A pure gold clip, I tell you. But I wanted the kind of evidence that a judge couldn't ignore, the kind that was stamped and sealed. I called a local surveyor, an old-school guy named Rick Morales, a retired county engineer who definitely didn't suffer fools. He agreed to do a certified boundary survey, marking every single property corner with new, shining steel pins and official GPS coordinates. It cost me a few $1,000s, a hard hit, but I knew, just knew, it was about to cost Debbie and her HOA much, much more. When Rick delivered the results, he gave me a slow, knowing smile. "You're solid, my friend. 100% outside the HOA. Their boundary ends right here." And he tapped the ground with his boot, a solid 10 feet before my driveway even began. I framed that certified document, put it in a handsome glass frame, and set it prominently on my porch railing like a trophy, hoping it would signal the end. 2 days later, I got a letter from the HOA's attorney demanding the removal of my unauthorized dwelling. I reread the word dwelling twice, then called my own lawyer, a property rights specialist named Tom Reeves, a man who had seen every flavor of HOA overreach and had absolutely zero tolerance for them. The battle lines were officially drawn, and if Debbie thought she could bully me off my own land, she was about to learn a very expensive lesson in actual property law. The first time the sheriff's deputy showed up, a young, nervous guy, he looked completely mortified. "Got a complaint from Sycamore Creek Estates, sir," he mumbled, glancing at his clipboard. "Something about illegal occupancy." I didn't say a word. I just walked inside, brought out the new survey report, the county deed, and the zoning exemption letter, and handed them over. He scanned them slowly, then let out a sharp little snort of laughter. "You're completely clean?" "Mr. Carter, looks like someone is wasting taxpayer time." That moment confirmed my suspicion. Debbie had escalated from petty harassment to outright false reporting. I went entirely systematic after that. Every letter was scanned and tagged. Every single call from a private number was logged, complete with audio voicemail if they left one. Even the tire tracks I found cutting across my gravel driveway were photographed and GPS tagged. I built a comprehensive digital folder labeled Sterling Harassment Evidence, with subfolders for video, audio, correspondence, survey, and police reports. If they wanted a war, I was building a massive digital arsenal. Then came the trash incident, a truly low point. One Monday morning, I found my garbage can overturned, the contents, mostly junk mail and old receipts, strewn across my yard. At first, I assumed it was just raccoons, standard rural life stuff. But when I checked the trail cam footage, I saw a familiar flashlight beam and that distinct floral windbreaker. Debbie wasn't just trespassing now. She was actively defacing property. I could have called the police immediately, but I wanted something undeniably airtight. So I set up the sting. I bought a tiny, cheap GPS tracker, the size of a matchbox, and I taped it securely underneath one of the HOA's courteous violation notices she was so fond of posting. And then I waited. That night, precisely at 10:42 p.m., the tracker pinged a static address. Deborah Sterling, 14 Sycamore Court. Gotcha. Now I had irrefutable proof she was physically taking my mail, which is a federal offense, and crossing my property line after dark. I immediately forwarded the timestamps and the corresponding video footage to Tom, my lawyer, who replied with a single, victorious text, "Perfect. Let them keep digging their own grave." 2 weeks later, I returned home to find a bright orange spray-painted violation lot 44 across my curb. The ultimate petty act. The problem, of course, was that my property didn't even have a lot number in their system. That was it, the final straw. Time for the counterpunch. Tom drafted a ferocious cease and desist letter under the relevant state civil code for harassment and invasion of privacy, citing the GPS data, the video evidence, and the certified survey. We sent it by registered mail to Debbie, her entire board, and their attorney. Within 24 hours, she was on my doorstep again, her face flushed crimson, shaking with rage, clutching the letter like a crumpled receipt. "You think this little scare tactic is going to work, Mr. Carter? You are surrounded by Sycamore Creek estates. We make the rules here!" I didn't raise my voice. I just slightly adjusted my phone, which was already recording. "I don't follow your rules, Miss Sterling," I said quietly and clearly. "I follow the law." She jabbed her finger toward my porch camera, the one she had been standing directly under, and shrieked, "We'll see what the county thinks." Good idea, I thought to myself. Let's show them. That week, Tom and I met with the county zoning department. I brought the full file, the survey, the dozens of photos, the video logs, the GPS tracking results, and the police report numbers from her false complaints. The zoning officer, a calm, middle-aged woman named Donna, flipped through everything, nodding slowly. "Yes," she sighed, "we've dealt with Sycamore Creek before. They overreach? I'll send an official final letter clarifying your property's exemption status." 3 days later, the HOA received the letter, stamped and signed. Property at 1205 Willow Creek Road lies conclusively outside Sycamore Creek Estates' HOA jurisdiction. That's when the real panic started for them. The HOA board called an emergency meeting. Word spread like wildfire through the neighborhood Facebook group. Screenshots, accusations, and a tidal wave of rumors. Someone even leaked that Debbie had been personally conducting these compliance checks. Homeowners, sick of her iron fist, started turning on her. One guy who had been there since the HOA's inception actually sent me a private message. We had no idea she was doing this. Honestly, half of us can't stand her, but I wasn't celebrating yet. Debbie, in her blind arrogance, still wasn't done. That weekend, she filed a personal civil complaint claiming I was devaluing adjacent HOA properties. But what she hadn't realized was that her own HOA's bylaws required mandatory board approval before filing any legal action, a crucial step she completely skipped. Tom just smiled when he saw the paperwork. "She's just violated her own charter," he murmured. We filed a swift motion to dismiss along with a massive counterclaim for harassment, trespass, and malicious prosecution. I attached a USB drive to the filing, the full video footage, the vandalism proof, and the GPS logs. The morning of the hearing, the courthouse was quiet, smelling of stale coffee and industrial cleaner. I arrived early, wearing the quiet confidence that comes from knowing you're absolutely right and having undeniable proof. Debbie, naturally, showed up late, flanked by her entire board, 3 terrified retirees with clipboards, whispering frantically. She was wearing a blinding magenta blazer and that same defiant smirk. It didn't last long. The judge, a sharp-eyed woman named Judge Martinez, opened the session briskly. When it was our turn, Tom simply stood and laid out the foundation, calmly and methodically. The certified county map, the GPS survey, the zoning exemption letter, and finally, the trail cam video showing Deborah Sterling trespassing at 10:42 p.m. The courtroom was dead silent. Then came the knockout blow. Tom produced the HOA bylaws, Section 14.3, which required recorded board minutes for any legal action. He flipped a page. "There are no minutes, Your Honor. Ms. Sterling filed this action on her own." Debbie's face completely drained of color. Judge Martinez looked over her glasses at the board. "Did the HOA authorize this suit?" "No, Your Honor," one of the board members squeaked out. "We didn't even know until last week." "Then this case," the judge said, tapping her pen once sharply, "is dismissed with prejudice." A brief, stunning pause. "Mr. Carter, your counterclaim for harassment and trespass will proceed." Debbie gasped, loud enough for the entire room to hear. The next week was a parade of depositions and damage control. Tom sent the HOA a no-nonsense settlement offer, cover all my legal fees, formally remove every fine, and issue a written, signed apology. Or we would pursue maximum damages for trespass, vandalism, and emotional distress. They tried to bluff. We didn't blink. By the following Monday, I received an email titled Settlement Acceptance. The attached PDF was the most beautiful document I have ever read. A full, legal acknowledgement that my property was not, and never would be, under their jurisdiction. Full reimbursement for all attorney costs, and a formal apology from the Sycamore Creek Estates Board. Debbie's signature at the bottom looked like it had been physically forced from her hand. 2 weeks later, Sycamore Creek held a special open meeting in their clubhouse. I attended, surprisingly, invited by a few fed-up homeowners who wanted the truth aired out. When I walked in, every single head turned. Debbie sat stiffly at the front table, jaw clenched, her gavel trembling. "Mr. Carter," she hissed through gritted teeth, "you are not a member of this HOA. You have no standing here." A homeowner I didn't know stood up from the back. "Maybe not, Debbie," he said, his voice ringing out, "but he's the only one who stood up to you." The room erupted in murmurs. I kept my comments short. "I didn't come to fight," I said, my voice steady. "I came to remind all of you that rules only work when they're backed by law, not by ego. Property lines exist for a reason. Respect them and nobody gets hurt. Ignore them and you will find out exactly how expensive arrogance can be." A few people actually clapped. Debbie slammed her gavel so hard it cracked. 3 weeks later, the word spread. Deborah Sterling had resigned for personal reasons. Her silver Mercedes was gone. The ridiculous Compliance Patrol stickers on the HOA vehicles quietly vanished. I went back to my porch, coffee in hand, and watched the sunrise over my fence line. The same fence she had tried to claim and control. The gravel crunched under my boots. The cameras blinked green. Peace at last was measurable. In the end, it wasn't about revenge. It was about boundaries, both literal and moral. You can't control what you don't own. You can't intimidate someone who documents everything, and you certainly can't bully your way past a property pin set in stone. So, if you ever find yourself staring down an overreaching HOA, please, for your own sanity and your wallet, do your homework, get your proof, and stand your ground. Because the law is quiet, but it speaks the loudest when you just let the facts do the talking. Drop your own HOA nightmare in the comments below. Tell me who was right, who was wrong, and what you would have done differently, and don't forget to subscribe for the next story. I've got plenty more where this came from.